Hi, it's just me again. Thanks to those of you who watched my video last week. I don't think it's as fun when me and Tanner aren't together, but gotta keep making videos while he's editing Saturday's Warrior. The Saturday's Warrior video Tanner has been working on, he's showed me a little bit of it. It's so good! I feel like you guys are really gonna like it. I'm really excited for all of us to see it done. In the meantime, today I'm doing a little Ask a Faith Transition Coach Q&A. I'm a faith transition coach. I wanted to start out by just explaining a little bit about what that means because I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression or communicate like a level of legitimacy that I do not have. So basically, coaching in the US is an unregulated industry. Anyone can get on the internet and be like, I'm a life coach, book a session with me. I have mixed feelings about that because obviously there's a lot of grifting that happens in the coaching community. There's also a lot of people who I don't think should be life coaches. One of the things I found, so I went through the Life Purpose Institute to get certified. I went with them because John and Margie DeLynn both got their coaching certifications through that program. One of the best things I learned in the program was the importance of managing your fixer and not assuming that you know what's best for someone else, you know, like trusting other people to come up with solutions for their own lives. And I really believe in that. I really think everyone's psyche reveals itself to them in layers. I think we all need to be able to trust both our own and other people's processes, because I feel like a lot of us have had experiences in life that have taken us from A to B, an A to B that we very much needed to go from and to. But the way that we got there was not necessarily conventional or the way that someone else might have anticipated that we would have got there. And like, how many times have we all been given advice from someone that we haven't taken, ultimately because we just weren't ready to take that advice? We might recognize it as salient, but we all just kind of have to play out the things that we feel we need to play out until we learn better or do differently, you know? I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not a coach's job to tell anyone what to do. I feel like when you say life coach, you kind of have an image of someone who's going to like tell you what to do with your life. I think it's more the role of a coach, from as I see it, especially with faith transitions coaching and relationship transitions, which I also do. And I guess I do kind of just general emotional wellness coaching. But I think it's just to help people figure out what they want to do. And like sometimes things such as shame, that's a good example, can block us from realizing what we want to do, or from even like exploring the question, because, you know, like we're all conditioned in various ways. So I think a good coach is good at asking questions more so than like giving you answers, you know? I mean, I think that's something that every coach just has to be mindful of, you know, like that you're not supposing that you know what's best for someone else. You're really just there to help them explore questions around what they want, what's going to be best for them. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not making this video to be like, you know, what I say goes or has any more legitimacy than you choose to give it because it resonates with you. Like you can disregard anything I say, and that is healthy. With that being said, I asked on Instagram for people to send in questions they had, or, you know, tell me about situations that they wanted advice on. There were some common themes, so I'm gonna try and answer ones that seemed more sort of widespread and how relevant they are to an ex-woman audience. I don't think I have any more disclaimers. I always feel the need to spend like 25 minutes doing disclaimers at the start of a video where I'm like, please don't take anything I say too seriously. Coaching's an unregulated industry. Careful who you trust. Not saying you should trust me, but certainly don't trust anyone who's trying to like force their solutions onto you. Every type of coach exists, I have discovered, including people who have not done their own work. So all right, I already know the first question we're going to talk about, because this was probably the most common question I got, was whether or not to cut off toxic Mormon family. So one person said, cutting off toxic Mormon family, yay or nay? Someone said, how to know when to go no contact with toxic family. When is it good to go no contact with toxic Mormon family? We've had the boundaries conversation, but it's completely up to me to stay vigilant and hold the line. Here's kind of my perspective on this. And I don't think there's a right or wrong perspective. I think the core of the issue is that we all need to learn for ourselves how to be in this world and how to engage with potentially emotionally immature people, even malevolent people. You know, we have to be able to interact with all types of people while still kind of staying grounded in grounded in ourselves and sort of our own values and our own boundaries and what's healthy for us. So I think if you're gonna cut off Mormon family members, I think you just want to be really clear about what the purpose is, because I don't think that just cutting off your Mormon family members in and of itself, and obviously this is all like so circumstantial and context dependent, and I'm just addressing this like at a broad level, so yeah, obviously. In and of itself, like cutting off toxic family members, so I'm going to assume that like when people say toxic, they mean, you know, people who don't honor your boundaries, who don't like respect your autonomy or respect your psychological personhood, you know, they really want to like embroil you in their dramas, whatever it may be. I'm assuming also in the ex-Mormon context that toxic tends to mean family members who just don't respect your experiences, they judge you a lot, they mischaracterize you. I've heard of Mormon family members like lying about their kids who have left or whatever, like there's a whole shit show. But assuming that these people truly are toxic, I would say the goal of cutting them off, or the reason that you might want to cut them off, either for a time or permanently. And I personally think that most of the time you should view cutting off family members especially as temporary and then kind of see how it goes, unless it's a situation where for some reason you just know that there's no coming back from it, you know, which can be easy to feel like that when emotions are high, but maybe that's not the case long term. But anyway, I think if you're gonna cut off toxic family members, it should be because I think generally it's because you realize that like you are not able to be around them without getting triggered to such an extent that it is like thwarting your own mental health and progress and healing, you know. It's like preventing you from living a healthy life, which if you've just left Mormonism, it's not just about living a healthy life. It's like you're also like healing from this really big thing a lot of the time. So if family members are getting in the way of you being able to do that, I do understand that there's a case to be made for cutting them off. And I think, especially if you're someone who has like repeatedly tried to enforce boundaries and they won't honor those boundaries, I mean, that then the writing kind of is on the wall at a certain point, you know? Like if you've repeatedly tried to enforce boundaries that someone won't honor, then I feel like cutting people off is sort of like the natural end product of that, because, you know, that's the name of the game with boundaries. That being said, I've also found that the way a dynamic between, let's say, like a believing parents and a now ex-Mormon child, that dynamic evolves with time. Like things that can seem so final and fatal and impossible to come back from can 3 years later be so much different. Like as we heal within ourselves and as, let's say in that situation, like the parents come more to terms with their feelings about the fact that their child has left, because obviously it's like there's two-way grief. It's genuinely traumatic a lot of the time for parents, for example, to learn that their children have left Mormonism, because in their minds they genuinely believe that you are leaving their eternal family, you're going to be damned, you know, like they've fully bought into the phobia indoctrination that is inherent to a lot of high control groups. So, you know, you got to have empathy for both sides. But I do think time can be more of a healer than we always realize. Like there have definitely been situations in my life where I have thought I would just never talk to someone again, we'd never be on good terms again, and then with time we've each grown and evolved and things can change. So I kind of want to just always tell people to like keep an open mind. I don't think you need to look at the question of like, should I cut off my Mormon family or not, through the lens of like it being permanent. But I do think, again, obviously, again, this is so circumstantial, but if your boundaries are repeatedly being crossed, if you're constantly getting triggered, someone mentioned in one question that the parents like refuse to stop trying to indoctrinate their kids in Mormonism. Like that would be so hard for me. I'm like, if I have kids and I'm taking them over to their grandparents' house and those grandparents are intent on putting Mormonism into their brains, that at a certain point you do have a responsibility, I think, to protect your children from high control groups. And Mormonism is a high control group, as much as like a lot of people have these very, you know, positive, happy associations with Mormonism in their childhood. Like it's still insidious, you know, there's still psychological wiring that's happening in that. And so, yeah, when kids are involved, I feel like there's potentially more of a case for cutting off toxic family members, that can also be tough because grandparents are a great source of free childcare, and that's not easy, as I've learned from having more and more friends as I get older who have kids. So all of this is to say is I don't have an opinion on like, yes, do it, or no, don't do it. But I think, you know, removing the trigger, let's say that it is a situation where every time you're around your parents, you're getting really triggered and they're saying fucked up stuff. Like, removing those triggers can certainly be helpful, but it doesn't, like, in and of itself necessarily change anything. I think the ultimate goal would be for all of us to be so sort of like grounded in ourselves and confident in our own abilities to set boundaries, and things like that we're not at risk of being pushovers or people pleasing in ways that aren't healthy, or, you know, we're not at risk of self-betraying when we're around people who are toxic. And I just want to give the caveat, it's an obvious point, I know you guys already know it, but like toxic people are generally, they're emotionally immature people, and people are emotionally immature because they haven't had the chance to mature emotionally. Like, emotional development is an aspect of development just like everything else. So I just think it's good to like keep that in mind, you know, like people are never, it's obviously so frustrating when you're around an emotionally immature person, and they, you know, they can even be spiteful. And I have a really hard time when I'm confronted with like spite, like feeling like someone is purposefully wanting to hurt me, or, you know, like just isn't able to interact in good faith. That is really, really tough. I have such a hard time with that. But just kind of trying to keep in mind that though, for example, in the case of believing parents, though they at some point did have power over you, they don't have to anymore. And so I just think whether you choose to cut anyone off or not, just make sure your ultimate focus is on you becoming more personally empowered. Does that make sense? Like, you becoming more grounded in who you are, and you know, more capable of being authentic. And I would definitely say that in the past I had when I first left Mormonism, I had a very hard time being around believers. Like, I told my ex-husband's parents that they were brainwashed because I was like 22 and I was just furious, and like, you know, this crazy thing had happened. I had no emotional coping skills. I was a baby in like every emotional aspect, I would say, and I just couldn't do it. But now, being around believers, I don't find it triggering. I don't feel the same need to get them to understand my side. I feel able to stay like very grounded in like, this is who I am and what I believe, and I'm not gonna hide that in any way. I'm not gonna like pretend to be something I'm not, or feel the need to like be dishonest in any way. But at the same time, I'm not gonna shove it in your face. Like, if you're a family that doesn't swear, I'm gonna try not to swear around you. I'm gonna try not to say oh my god around you if I know that that's something you might be sensitive to, but not to the level to where it's sort of like infringing on my own sense of self. Like, I'm not gonna like not order a coffee at a restaurant with you to like protect your feelings. I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, I think there's kind of a dance you can do. And I have actually found that since I have not got as triggered by being around believers, like, I don't find that triggering anymore. I'm able to just see it as like, I mean, to be honest, I don't say this to like sound patronizing. It's like a tough thing to talk about, but I'm like, believing LDS people to me are victims of a high control group. Like, they are victims of these psychological tactics that groups like that use. And obviously, yeah, but then it's tough because I don't want to like be around people and be like, I think you're a victim, you know. I want to meet people where they're at in like a respectful, adult to adult thing. So, yeah, that's why it can be kind of tough talking on the internet, about this stuff. But yeah, this has been a very long-winded answer. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know if you should cut off your toxic family or not, but I think if you do, maybe do it on kind of a trial basis, and make sure you're clear about what your goals are. I think if you're just doing it as a sort of reaction to your own anger, there are times when I think it can almost like delay your healing. Because if you just become so focused on like, they're so toxic and I'm going to cut them off and like that will show them, you know, that obviously like isn't healing. That is, it's valid and like your feelings are valid, and totally get why it's infuriating and all that stuff. But yeah, I do think, for me personally, forgiveness is an important spiritual principle, and I know that can be controversial, and I don't mean it through the lens of like well, I guess what I'm saying is that forgiveness doesn't have to mean that people have access to you anymore. But I just think, to me, forgiveness means kind of reckoning with the fact that we're all the products of our genetics and experiences, and even the most harmful, messed up people in this world didn't choose to be like that. You know, we were all being programmed from the minute we were born, and free will is not real the way that we like to think that it is. And I've got a cat eating a plant in the background. I feel like I've said the same thing like 12 times, but basic point is just that to cut off or to not cut off is just one aspect of like the broader picture of how can I be more personally empowered and able to, not dull my authenticity for someone else's approval. Sorry. I think the reason saying that forgiveness is important can seem controversial is because some people can hear that and think that means that you're like minimizing harm or excusing harm, and I don't think it's about that at all. I just think for our own sanity, it is so helpful to realize that people aren't choosing to be the way that they are when they suck. Like, most harmful things in this world are done by emotionally immature people. Like, toxic people are emotionally immature people, I would say. And I think it can help, here's what it is. It can help things feel less personal when we realize that free will is kind of an illusion, you know, and people aren't choosing to be fucked up. That's like what life has made them, unfortunately. And I know some people will push back by being like, well, I went through this really bad thing and I didn't do this really bad thing, you know, because of that. So like, that's no excuse. And I get that, but everyone's so different. Like, everyone's life is a different interplay of factors. People's access to like different resources and ideas is so different. Like, we're just all so different, right? So I think depersonalizing the ways that people have hurt us, I think can be very healing for ourselves, you know, because there is just that childhood part of us that when our parents, for example, are being really fucked up to us or whatever, there's a part of us that does take it personally, because children take everything personally. Like, that's sort of developmentally appropriate. That's just how children are. Like, if they're not getting their needs met, it feels better for them, and it probably helps them survive more to believe, oh, well, there's something different I could do, and like, you know, there's the possibility that my needs could get met if only I was different in this way. And obviously this leads to like endless maladaptive coping mechanisms and is not good for so many reasons. But I think it's probably better for kids to feel sort of a false sense of control than to realize, oh, I have no control. My needs will never get met by these people until, you know, I'm going to spend 18 years with them and it's just not going to happen. Like, I can't imagine reckoning with that as a kid, you know. It's almost like better to have a little bit of delusion to get you through it. So why was I saying all this? I think it can be healing for us to realize that people's messed up behavior is not a reflection of us. It's not personal. It's about them. It's about what they're capable of. People can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves, blah, blah, blah. But if you are thinking about cutting off Mormon family members, my heart is with you. I'm sorry. And my hope for everyone would be that in the future, when you're in a more healed place and everything doesn't feel quite so triggering, and you're able to sort of look at your parents' membership in Mormonism as just like, it's an unfortunate phenomenon, but, you know, it doesn't touch you quite so personally, that maybe you can find bridges to still meet on. You know, I think we all, whether you grew up in a high control group or not, we all have to sort of reckon with the fact that a lot of the time our parents can't like truly see us in our entirety, and that's sort of something we all have to grieve. But that you might be surprised the bridges you can still meet your parents on and have that exchange of love. If you do genuinely have a situation where like there's no future for you having a relationship with your parents, for example, I know I just keep using parents as the example, then fair enough. But yeah, I don't know, that they are at the end of the day like your family, and I don't say that to be like, oh, they're family so you should excuse harmful behavior. I don't mean that, but I just think there is a little bit, for me at least, I think there is a little bit more of an incentive to sort of try and make relationships with family members work, because they share your genetic, like, you know, family is a thing, and with a friend it's not as big of a deal to sort of just go your separate ways and be like, that was a season of my life, and, you know, move on. But with family, you're always going to be connected to them, you know, you're going to see them at funerals and weddings, and so I think if you can find a way to make things work, then that's beautiful. But if you can't, that's fine too. And it's not all on you, you know? Like, whatever you choose, just be nice to yourself. It's not easy. Also, if you have experience with either cutting out people or not, I'd love it if you could share in the comments, like, what you sort of, like, learned from doing that. Like, was it really helpful for you? When you get into, like, a sort of a messed up dynamic with someone, I feel like sometimes you really do need to fully step away for a period of time for there to be any chance of you then creating a healthier version of that relationship in the future. Because I think sometimes when you're in like an enmeshed dynamic, codependent dynamic, you know, there's like these certain rules of engagement that have sort of historically been there. It's really good to like completely sever ties for a little bit sometimes, because then you can like meet each other again as new people. But then obviously, again, you're only in control of the you part of it. So if that person, when you reconvene, insists on still treating you the same way they always did, you know, like pushing over your boundaries and all that, then obviously that doesn't necessarily fix anything. But the next question is how to respond to people's well-meaning comments or advice that don't align with your belief system, i.e. you're going through a hard time and a family member reminds you that you can always pray to Heavenly Father or that He loves you, etc. I know they think saying this will touch your heart or comfort you, but I just feel unseen and pressured to respond in an inauthentic way. And it feels overkill to take that moment to remind them that that's something you've deconstructed, doesn't ring true, etc., when they were just trying to be helpful in the way they know how. Such a good question. Once again, no black and white answers, I don't think. I like that they said it feels overkill to take that moment to remind them that that's something you've deconstructed, because I feel like I would maybe lean towards that. Like, not in a, you know, not in any kind of like aggressive or angry way, but just, I might find myself in that situation being like, yeah, that, I mean, that's not a spiritual belief that I align with, or that's not something that resonates with me, but like I get where you're coming from, thank you. Like, I don't know if there's like sort of a soft way you can say something like that. That might be how I would imagine I'd approach it. At this point in my life, I really like to just be respectful of people of all beliefs, even when they say batshit crazy things. I no longer feel that it is my job to be like, here's why what you just said was deeply fucked up. But though saying that, it's also dependent. But you know what I mean? Like, I certainly don't go into interactions with believers being like, all right, let's get them out of that belief system. Like, I don't think it's our job. But I kind of am the person that will, in like the most respectful way I know how, that doesn't necessarily make them feel attacked, I will be like, oh, well, here's what I believe. And I think if you just sort of say it without shame, because that's the thing, sometimes I feel like we are nervous to like assert how we feel about things like that, and so then that can almost be read by the other person as like a level of shame, or it can like make things weirder than they need to be. So maybe if someone said to me, oh, you're going through a hard time, you should pray to Heavenly Father, I might be like, yeah, I'm not a monotheist or a Christian, you know, I don't believe in like a male deity like that, but I don't know, you're right, I do need to spend more time kind of taking spiritual time for myself, so I'm gonna maybe do some more yoga and meditate, and, you know, I don't know, if there's a way you can sort of like create like a nice feeling of like, that's not my thing, but yeah, you're right, I should spend more time doing things that are spiritually enriching to me, for me, and then that I think can be a nice moment to tell someone, like, and for me that looks like meditation or spending time in nature, and, you know, trying to do it in a way that is very like good natured, and to where it's not, you're like, well, I don't believe in that, and, you know, you don't want it to come across as like disdainful in any way, or because again, it sounds like the person asking the question is like recognizing this is like coming from a really good place. So I never want to shit on anyone who's like genuinely coming from a good place. So yeah, I don't think it's overkill to sort of state what you think. I think it's also completely valid to just make life easier for yourself sometimes and be like, oh, thanks for the suggestion, you know, and just sort of like move on, because you don't always want to get into like that kind of stuff at every dinner or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with not sharing your truth as well, if you just kind of want to get through the moment. I think as long as you don't say anything that is like implying a level of agreement that you don't have, you know, like you can say, oh, thanks for the suggestion, and that's not implying that you think it's a good suggestion. It's just, you're just recognizing that someone is giving you their best advice because they love you or whatever. Was that a helpful answer? I don't know. Again, please will you guys share your thoughts in the comments, because it would be wild if I was the person who had the best advice or answers to any of these. Like, statistically, I just don't think that's possible. So one of you probably has a better answer than me for every single question. Next question. How did you first go about leaving a faith without getting sucked into another one, while still engaging with community and learning to trust community again? Such a good question. I think I had quite a low risk of being sucked into another faith after leaving Mormonism. I think because I hadn't grown up in any kind of high control group or religion or faith of any kind. And by this point, when I left Mormonism, I was 22, having joined Mormonism at like 16, 17. So it just became so clear in my brain, like, the name of all of that, you know? And I do think, thinking about the community aspect, I even swung too far the other way. I was so averse to any, like, suggestion that everyone in a group should think the same, or that I do think I shunned community in a lot of ways in those early years and was kind of afraid of it, or found it cringe, or would just think any community efforts were sort of pretentious or whatever. I guess there's kind of like a level of protection in that kind of nihilism right after leaving a high control group, but they had its downsides, you know. Being that nihilistic certainly had a negative impact on my mental health, and it took me some time to feel able to engage with community again. I think ultimately I felt safe engaging in community again when I trusted myself again, like when I'd done enough sort of healing and work within myself to where I wasn't worried about getting swept up in anything else. And, you know, I just sort of trusted myself to, I think that's what it all comes down to, is like trusting that you are able to navigate whatever happens to you. I think the sad truth is, I think some people get sucked into other things after leaving high-demand religions and cults because, well, I guess like your psyche finds ways to get its needs met, and like those are the options available in a lot of situations. You know, like our society that most of us live in is not very good at fostering healthy, non-controlling community. So that is just kind of a problem that I think we all swim in, is that we live in such an individualist culture, but we're community beings. We crave community, we need it, and I it's totally understandable, you know, why people get sucked into other high control groups after leaving Mormonism. And I guess all we can really do is like all just try and educate ourselves and others on that phenomenon and what high control groups look like. But I don't think there's some perfect answer, because if someone truly feels like unable to survive without this certain need for community being met, then they're gonna find a way to meet it. Like that was me joining Mormonism, and still to this day, like it's not that me joining Mormonism was necessarily bad or good, but there were certainly ways that would have been way healthier for me to get the needs met that Mormonism was meeting, but those did not come into my sphere enough for me to choose them. So it was like Mormonism was the prominent option that I had. I think you can't trust others until you trust yourself, and that's just kind of a journey we're all on. And I feel like the advice you sort of need to hear, you know, regarding trust and community is going to be different depending on what you lean towards. For example, if you're someone who kind of just leans towards never trusting anyone, it might be good for you to hear, like, it's safe to trust people, like, experiment with trusting people a bit more. But then if you're someone who's prone to trusting too much, then you probably need to hear, you know, that it's going to be useful for you to become more skeptic. So this is also circumstantial. There's no perfect answer, but I think the way you don't get sucked into another thing is just by learning about high control groups. Stephen Hassan, I got to interview him for Mormon Stories, and he has done such great work educating people on the influence continuum, which I think is a model he created. I think just being real with yourself, you know, about what it is you're seeking. And I also think maybe something that can be useful is being willing to be a bit patient, you know, because finding a community you love and can thrive in is probably not something that's going to happen overnight or particularly easily. But if you have the mindset that like it needs to happen ASAP, then you're a lot more prone to getting sucked into things, right? And to making more unwise decisions about the types of communities you're involved in. So I think having a measure of patience and remembering like this too shall pass, everything is temporary. I personally think once you like can identify what you want, aka a healthy community, it's so much more possible for you to find it. But I think you need to make sure that in your what I want definition is like I want community, but not if it's going to come at the cost of, you know, self-betrayal and my own authenticness and surrendering my autonomy to an ideology. You know, just being really clear about what you do and don't want in a community so that you know to look for that. Because when I was joining Mormonism at 17, I didn't know, you know, I was just like, this makes me feel good and so therefore it's fine, you know. So just being very somber, real with yourself about it all. I've already gone past my 3 p.m. caffeine cutoff point. I hate when that happens. This question says, how to revoke my membership while I still have family in the same house that are active? I mean, it sounds like the real question there is how to navigate the fact that they're going to find out, because generally if you leave Mormonism and you resign, it comes through the gossip, the toxic gossip train, if you will. Ew. Still can't believe that Colleen Ballinger apology ukulele video is real. I think about it like 12 times a day. If you really want to resign your membership and you have active family members in the same house as you, as long as you're like willing to deal with the ramifications of that, I mean, that's kind of just how it's going to be, right? I mean, you can use nonviolent communication, you can be as mature as you can be in terms of how you talk about it with them, but yeah, you do have to anticipate that people might have a strong reaction to that, and that might kind of suck for you. And it's valid if you maybe want to put that off until you wouldn't have to deal with as much drama. It's valid either way, you know, it's just sort of what you want and what you're willing to put up with. So I don't know if I have a good answer to that. It's also especially hard if you're a minor, because obviously your parents have a certain level of control over you, and that sucks. I hate hearing stories of people that are underage that have to keep engaging with Mormonism genuinely out of fear for their safety, because they know that their freedoms and privileges will be so negatively impacted by their parents finding out that it's genuinely safer for them to just pretend. And I'm all for like, do what you gotta do, you know, obviously. This is a good question. Someone said, I no longer actively entertain the thought of family leaving, but how do I fully let go of the false hope? I think if you no longer actively entertain the thought of your family leaving, it sounds like you've done the bulk of the work there. How do I fully let go of the false hope? I mean, it's always possible that people could leave Mormonism. Like, I think we've all seen that in the last however many years we've been out. Like, people that you would never in a million years think would question or leave do. So it is always a possibility that it could happen. So I don't know that you have to fully let go of the false hope, because it's like, it is one of many possibilities. Like, maybe it seems more likely that they're probably going to stay because they're fully converted, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's okay to sort of, you know, you do hope that members of high control groups will sort of wake up to the ways they're being psychologically manipulated or what's the other word? You know, just the ways that they are being shrunk by these ideologies, the ways that shame is negatively impacting their lives, all that stuff. Like, you always hope for that, I think. I just think as long as you're not, you know, feeling some kind of responsibility to make that happen, or I suppose like hoping for it too much. But I really just think with anything that generally a good thing to do is to just sit with that part of you with compassion for it. Like, it sounds like you're not someone who's like sitting around just like desperately wishing their family would leave, but there's a part of you that's like, oh, but what if they did? That would be so good. Like, I want that for them. I think literally just sitting down and feeling how that feels in your body, and like sending love to that part of you that wants that, because of course there's a part of you that wants that, you know. That's okay. It's okay that we all contain multitudes at the same time, and maybe logically, you know, that's probably not going to happen. I should let go of that hope. But then there's another part of you that's like, but what if it did happen? You know, those things can coexist. And I think instead of trying to like get rid of certain parts of ourselves, if we can just turn towards them and be like, I see you, I get you, I love you, I'm here to listen anytime you need to talk. I feel like that's kind of all we can do. And then when the different parts of ourselves feel more heard, then, maybe there's a higher chance that they'll go away if they even need to. I don't know. But it's okay that part of you is there, I guess, is my general thought. How do I keep good relationships with believing family after deconstructing when time with them feels so bad? That's a really tough one, because I think it's hard to have a good relationship with someone who you feel bad around. I mean, is there a way to do that? I mean, at that point, I suppose if you feel bad around believing family members, but you want to have a good relationship with them, I suppose you just have to sort of have the mindset of like, I am engaging with them and spending time with them sort of for a higher purpose. And I suppose there's a way that can be healthy if you're seeing it as like, I want to love my family, even though they're in this group that like alienates them from me. I still want that channel of love to be there between us. I still want to meet them on whatever bridges I can. I think obviously doing whatever you can to like work on your own healing and sense of sort of self-worth and everything, that might help with the feeling bad around them piece. And I suppose just like celebrating the little wins might be helpful. Like if you and your mum have like a fun little conversation about like a movie you both liked, then I'm like, great, that's a bridge you met on. That is like, some like beautiful human to human interaction and like awesome. Maybe they don't see you in every other way, but it sounds like you're sort of, you're wanting the relationship to be good, I guess. So if genuinely your primary thing is like, I want to have good relationships with my believing family members, kind of no matter what, ish, then I guess you just have to be like, what bridges can I meet them on? And then try and do that. But also I'd say if it's feeling so bad all the time, that might be worth looking at. Like it's okay to take space. Also, I suppose like doing whatever kind of self-care, sitting with yourself that you need to do both before and after, to try and mitigate some of the harm. Because again, I don't love the thought of like someone continually showing up to spend time with people that they feel bad around. Like that doesn't seem ideal. But I understand that nothing is black and white with all this stuff, and like it's okay to be uncomfortable. I guess I would just really do like a solid debrief after of like making sure you're sort of processing the feelings, the bad feelings after, like recognizing what parts of myself felt like wounded by what my dad said at dinner, or really like diving into like how, again, coming back to that thing about the different parts of us, like really turning towards the pain afterwards and making sure you're like sitting with it and saying like, I see you, I get you, I love you, I'm here for you. That's what I would do, I suppose. Does anyone else have any better advice in the comments? Please share. Someone said, what has surprised you about post-faith people? Any unexpected commonalities? The one that comes straight to mind is, I think people, especially women, but people who are leaving Mormonism have a really hard time letting themselves honestly confront their desires. Like Mormonism, I've said this so many times before, I said it in my Thrive presentation, but Mormonism has this idea that people who leave are hedonists and they just want to go off and do whatever they want with no thought for other people or the consequences. But I've not found that to be true. There is so much shame that blocks people from entertaining their own desires. And like, just because we have a desire doesn't mean we have to act on it, but I think it's really helpful for all of us to take an honest inventory of our desires without shame, because we don't like choose the things that we desire. And I think if we try to ignore them or we don't confront them, then we relegate them to the shadow realm, to use like Jungian speak. And then I do feel like they come out in more dysfunctional ways. So I generally think it's good for everyone to be like taking an honest inventory of their desires. And most of us contain many contradictory desires, like sometimes we have a desire for something that like ultimately wouldn't be good for us and that is maybe more fleeting. And then other times we have, this is a big one with a lot of the people I coach. It's like they have these desires that feel like a real like true need, like something their soul is really hungering for, but kind of confronting it and then thinking about acting on it would upend the current structure of their life in such a way that it's really, really scary. So everything, I just think, always comes back to being compassionate with yourself, being honest with yourself, slowing down, remembering that, like, you don't have to have all the answers at once, but, like, we're sort of wired by life, whether you're in a high control group or not. I just think most people are sort of wired to run from a lot of parts of themselves. And then in doing that, it can create various dysfunctions. And I think we're all kind of under the illusion sometimes that it's going to be, like, bad in some way or scary or whatever to confront certain things in us or that we want or whatever. But I think getting as clear of a picture as possible is the best thing to do. Do you guys agree? Every time I say anything, I'm, like, scanning in my brain of, like, but what are the times when that's not true? And, like, how could you maybe be giving bad advice here? So, yeah. I think post-faith people, I think it's an ongoing journey to learn to honestly confront your desires without shame, because and there can be shame that is so deep, like, we don't even, like, notice it running in the background or like realize how many of our other, like, actions and thoughts and beliefs are, like, predicated on a shame story. So that's just something. Someone said, best advice to deconstruct modesty culture and the false idea that modesty equals safety. Yeah, I think modesty is an interesting one, because I don't think shunning modesty culture means you have to show your shoulders or show your legs or show your, it's not about that. But I mean, ultimately it's getting away from the idea that the way you dress determines your worth or like says anything about who you are. Although that being said, I mean, the way we dress does communicate things about who we are, whether or not we like that fact. Like, we are drawn to certain aesthetics because the sort of people and maybe ideas and activities that we associate with those aesthetics resonates with us. So it's not completely true that, like, the way we dress says nothing. But I think just empirically we know that modesty doesn't equal safety, right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like all the research and studies and stuff show that you're not, like, more or less at risk of being sexually assaulted because of the way you dress. Like, people don't, that's just, like, a false idea as far as I know. I think in terms of, like, as a woman personally navigating going beyond modesty culture, I think, again, just, like, recognizing, I guess it's just, like, watching your own thoughts in a way and realizing, are there times where you look at a dress in a store and you're like, oh, that's so cute, and then, a voice comes in that's like, oh, but then you'd be showing that, and you're just kind of, like, watching for what stories and judgments are going on. I think noticing what you maybe judge in how other people dress is a great place to start. I think just generally in life, noticing what you judge in others is a wealth of wisdom in terms of, like, what you can learn about yourself, because usually the things we judge in others, we judge in ourselves, and things that we, like, don't even consider in ourselves, we wouldn't even notice in someone else. A good example I always give with this is, like, I've never really thought about my nose that much because it's never really been, like, anything, like, it's never been, like, good or bad one way or the other. It's just been, like, a nose. So it's just, like, I never notice what people's noses look like. But then some people I feel like I'll really, like, notice what people's noses look like because maybe they have an insecurity about their nose or, whatever the thing is. But, noticing the thoughts that come up for you. I don't know, what else is there really with going beyond modesty culture? I think sometimes being willing to sit in the discomfort of, like, I know for me there were times when I first left the church where it's like, I know I do want to wear this thing, but the reality is, like, I do feel uncomfortable going out in it. And so I guess sometimes it's a case of just exposure therapy, and the more you do something, the more that discomfort goes away, and you kind of know initially from a logical perspective that it's fine to wear that thing, but you have to kind of, like, teach your body that it is actually safe to wear that thing and it is okay. What have you guys done to overcome modesty culture? I feel like, again, because I didn't grow up Mormon, it wasn't too hard. But that being said, I still have situations where I don't like being too scantily clad in certain situations because I know that it will be received a certain way. And that's kind of just something we will have to accept, I guess. I remember I talked to Natasha Helfer Parker about this once. I was like, I want to, wear, like, short shorts and a tank top in the summer, but, like, I I feel like men do objectify me if I do that, and I don't like that. So, like, what do I do? And Natasha was like, well, you can't do anything about the fact that, like, certain visual stimuli will, like, will provoke certain people to have a certain response, you know? Like, it's okay for, even though it's, like, so uncomfortable to imagine, like, the wrong type of man, like, be finding you appealing, it's like, like, that is life. Like, some people are gonna, like, sexualize you because you wear a certain thing, and you just have to kind of be, again, grounded in yourself enough to where you're like, that's not my problem, that's nothing to do with me, that's on them. And also, it's not my job to go around wondering anyway. Like, yeah, but it's tough. I guess I just want to say that, like, I feel for you, because it's not a black and white thing. Again, it's like you want to just be like, fuck modesty culture, I'm gonna wear whatever I want, but it's like you still have to reckon with the fact that, like, people are gonna see you a certain way, and that just, like, still sucks. So it just is, like, kind of, like, sucks for everyone, whether you're in modesty culture or, like, living in rebellion to it. It's just is kind of, like, shitty that we have to think about it at all, and that the way we dress as women especially is, like, so complicated. Ooh, this is sort of I suppose an adjacent question. Tips for overcoming the fear of being seen for women. That is relatable. I definitely relate to feeling the fear of being seen. I suppose the high level answer I would give is, like, most of the time if we're afraid of being seen, it's because we're sort of afraid that there's something there that we feel shame about, or that we feel someone else will reject us for. So I suppose it's important to remember that being vulnerable, and I feel like, you know, being seen is very vulnerable. It's not about, like, guaranteeing a certain outcome. Like, it is part of being vulnerable that sometimes people will reject you for that, and that's okay. You know, that doesn't make vulnerability not worth it. It's just, that's, like, part of the sifting process, right? That's why you're vulnerable, because then the people that aren't for you will sort of naturally be swept away, and the ones that are will be more drawn to you. I feel like everything comes back to shame. All my thinking lately is, like, so related to shame. I've just been thinking about it a lot as a concept. I think the more we love ourselves and the more we uproot shame in ourselves, the easier it feels to be seen, because we kind of know we're good all the way down, even though everyone contains multitudes. We're all capable of doing good and doing bad, you know. But, like, when you really, like, trust who you are and like, know yourself, then I think you're more comfortable with, like, some people will mischaracterize me, or some people won't like this thing about me. But it's tough. It's tough when, like, your whole life survival has depended on you hiding your true self and not letting yourself be seen, and then suddenly you're just supposed to flip it, you know, potentially even in your middle age or older. Like, that's hard to do. So it's a journey for all of us, and I have times where I'm like, yeah, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable, that's what life's all about. And then I have times where I just want to just never be perceived by anyone ever, and I guess it's also kind of seasonal. I feel like I've had a period lately where I'm just like, do not perceive me. But yeah, it's a roller coaster. Again, just watching your thoughts for the stories that come up, the judgments that come up. I know I'm always harping on about meditation, but I feel like that is so useful for getting better at observing your thoughts and creating that little bit of space in between, you know, stimulus and response. Self-love is not a... Self-love or self-acceptance, if that's, like, a term you prefer, is not an easy journey. I think something that sort of logically helps me is just, again, remembering that we're all the products of our genetics and experiences. We're all just different iterations of the same thing. We're all Homo sapiens. We all bleed the same, as cheesy as it sounds, and it's just the name of the game that some people won't like us, and some people will judge us, and everyone is just operating through their own lenses, and what people are judging in you is a reflection of them, not of you, because I think, like, a truly compassionate worldview, again, it doesn't excuse harm, but it is able to grasp that like there is like a million factors going back to when the earth was first evolving that determine like why everyone does everything. Yeah, no one's choosing to be the way that they are, even though it's useful to, you know, like operate as if we have free will, and that's useful. Sorry if it's annoying and boring that I keep saying this, but I really think it's so important to take time, especially when you know, if you're mired in this fear of being seen, for example, but just with anything you're going through, to take time to just really sit with yourself, turn towards the part of you that feels afraid of being seen. Like, what are you afraid of? And like, listen to them. And I hope this doesn't sound like too woo-woo. To me, this is all like very sensible advice, but I know we all come from like different backgrounds and like schools of thought regarding psychology or whatever. But yeah, I think just turning towards the part of you that is afraid to be seen, acknowledging why. You probably already have a great sense of why you're afraid to be seen, and like really breathing deeply into that and like noticing how it all feels in your body, and just being like, I see you and I love you, and I get that, you know, that fear, this part of me that is afraid is trying to protect me ultimately, but I'm gonna have you sit in the back seat because it's not helpful for you to be driving this car. I'm going to be driving this car, but I love you and I see you and I'm here for you. You know, I feel like creating that kind of relationship with the different parts of ourselves generally like removes a lot of the charge that I think can get us really like het up, you know, like just acknowledging there are different parts of me. They exist for a reason. I have compassion for all of them being there. I think that's probably your best bet. Once again, everyone else, share your thoughts in the comments. This should probably be the last question because I feel like I haven't answered that many questions, but I've kind of gone on for a long time with a lot of them. So this person says, advice on handling kids in a mixed faith marriage. Wife is nuanced but active. I'm out. I obviously don't have kids, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I guess it's good that your wife is nuanced. I feel like that is already vastly superior to someone being extremely orthodox and more rigid in their thinking, so that's cool. When I think about the kid thing, you know, having kids and having one parent who believes and one who doesn't, again, this is something I really, my heart really goes out to people in this situation, because for me, I'm terrified of high control groups, you know, I know too much, they're terrifying. And so the idea of like my children being involved in a high control group is very, very scary to me. And, you know, as a parent, you obviously want to like protect your kids at all costs. And it's so hard when one parent is like seeing that we need to protect our kids from this thing, but then to the other parent, like, no, this is a good thing. Like, that is such a hard situation. I can't even imagine how that must feel. Because, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's, like, common for parents to have different ideas on what it looks like to protect their kids. But that's a big one, you know, when it's, like, an entire ideology shaping everything. I think that the main thing I would say to make sure of is just that both parents... Because, I mean, usually in this situation, I feel like the believer kind of gets more special treatment, you know, because, like, they went into the marriage and the child rearing as believers. I think just make sure... you both have equal ability to share what you believe with kids. Like, don't let it become a situation where you go quiet because, you know, you allow the shame that Mormonism puts on you as the non-believer to, like, dictate how you interact with your kids, or, like, try not to respond to, like, threats from the other parent. I just think it's the only way I can see in my head that you can, like, navigate this situation as healthily as you can, given the fact that, like, well, you can't change the fact that your spouse is a believer. Making sure there is space for you to share what you believe with kids, especially if they're getting exposed to a lot of Mormon messaging. You know, it's so important that they're then also able to hear, well, Daddy doesn't think like that. He thinks like this, and that's okay. And, you know, creating an environment in your home, I guess, where both parents' opinions and beliefs are valued equally, which I know can be so tough, because the whole thing with Mormonism is, like, you know, they genuinely believe that teaching kids anti-Mormon stuff, or, you know, ex-Mormon stuff, or non-Mormon stuff, you know, anything that isn't Mormonism is, like, so threatening to kids, and so that is, yeah, God, that's so hard. But yeah, I'd say just like however you can make sure you advocate for the way you see things being taught, so that just making sure, I guess, that kids aren't just primarily being exposed to Mormon messaging. I feel like I just said the same thing in like 6 times in a row. I also think the book Nonviolent Communication is really helpful for just learning to communicate with people who think very differently to you. Obviously, whatever you and your wife can do to improve your communication, and again, have it so that both of your beliefs and thoughts and feelings and desires are valued equally, you know, like that's going to be your best bet, I suppose. But then it's a whole other question when like that's not possible because someone refuses to bend, you know. And then when kids are in the picture and one person refuses to bend, I'm so sorry for anyone going through that. That's really shit. Oh God, okay, I'll do one more question just because I saw this one and it broke my heart. How do I deal with the fear that my children will choose Mormonism over me? I suppose like a blunt answer is I guess they might. That's a possibility. Dealing with the fear, I suppose, is like an individual thing for you. And once again, I just say like turn towards the part of you that is afraid and like feel compassion for that part of yourself. And if there's nothing you can do, you know, if you have like adult children, or I'm not sure what the situation is, but it's like if there's ultimately nothing you can do about whether your children will choose Mormonism over you, I mean, I suppose the one thing I would say you always have control of is like how you engage with your children. And I think the more loving you are and the more you create space for them to just be whatever they are, that's your best bet. Because it doesn't, I do think love is a disrupting force. And especially when kids are learning, again, not sure if they're like minors or adult kids or anything, but when they're learning a lot of shame-based ideas at church, I think you just being a space of not that, you know, can be powerful. Beyond, you know, the way that you interact with your kids, it is kind of out of your control, I assume. So it's just about like, yeah, how can you deal with that fear? How can you relate to that fear that's in you in the best way possible? And my opinion on that is that like the best way to relate to any feeling that we have is with compassion and with curiosity, and, you know, like letting the wounded part of us speak, because it might like sound woo-woo and silly, but it's like there are so many sort of mechanisms in our brains, and there's just so many forces, I feel like, that can come in when we're feeling a thing that is unpleasant, that stop us from actually turning to it. And I really do believe if we kind of like hear our feelings out more and like sit with them more, that they will can like dissipate faster, but B, like I really just think everything is about like changing the way you relate to your feelings, so you're not living your life like running from them, because the running from them kind of ensures that they'll stay with you for longer, I think. Obviously, things like community support can be really helpful as well. Like, you're not alone. There are lots of other people who have that fear, who, you know, raise their kids in Mormonism and now they've left and their kids are all in. Like, that, it's certainly not an isolated experience that you're going through. And I think however you can connect with other people going through that and like commiserate together and hear each other out, that's also so important. We can't do all of our like healing and emotional processing individually, though I am like an advocate for, you know, taking on that task and doing as much as you can. Like, again, we are communal beings. We're like wired for community and tribalism for good or for bad. I'm sorry you're going through that. I think, again, just meeting your believing loved ones, in this case your kids, on whatever bridges you can, I think that can be powerful. And you never know when just like even a small connection of someone feels safe to talk about movies with you, or like whatever it is, whatever like strength of a loving channel you can help create between you and believing loved ones, you never know when that could be like such a saving grace, you know. I think love is powerful, both for yourself and for others, and I am getting really sick of myself talking at this point. It's so much nicer when Tanner's with me and I can listen to him and be like, oh yeah, he's saying the thing that I wish I was saying right now, and so like we're all good on answering that question. Thank you for joining me for this Q&A. If you want to support this channel and help us keep making content like this, we fully rely on donations to keep it going. So we have a Patreon. That's the funnest way to support us, in my opinion, because we read 80s Mormon fiction every week on Patreon, and it's my favorite content we make. We also have PayPal and Venmo, which is linked in the description box. We also have merch. I'm sending love to all of you, whatever you're going through. I hope that regardless of what stage you're in of transitioning out of Mormonism, I hope you're able to be as like compassionate and gentle with yourself and others, really, as possible. I hope you're improving gradually or quickly at setting healthy boundaries. I hope that you're finding people in your life that make your burden a little bit lighter. And if you don't have anyone, then I'm glad the internet exists so we can all have like a little bit of, you know, community via that. Though it is ultimately insufficient, it is better than nothing. So again, thank you for being here. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. I'm so excited about the Saturday's Warrior video.